The headlines these days are full of environmental hazards all around us. In recent news, we've heard about the massive oil spill in the ocean waters off Huntington Beach here behind me. The spill endangered wildlife and also released harmful toxins into the air. We've also heard about the fires that have consumed our forests and the long-lasting rise in temperatures we've endured. Activists are saying the use of fossil fuels and pollution are large factors of climate change that are harming our planet. But stories about other everyday environmental risks are often left out of major media coverage, even though they also cause harm in our community. Some organizations in Southern California are taking steps to spread awareness and repair the damage caused by these risks. On Point's Vanessa Garcia has more.
Thank you, ALAHNA. Let's now welcome the members of our panel. Today we have Jessica Toth, who is the Executive Director of the SOLANA Center for Environmental Innovation, a San Diego-based nonprofit organization. Carlos Campero, who is the Director of Conservation Programs for the LA Conservation Corps. Rita Kampalath, Sustainability Program Director from the Chief Sustainability Office of LA County, and Katie Wightman, Field Institute Director for the SEQUOIA Parks Conservancy. I first want to thank all of you for coming today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Good to be here.
Of course. Jessica, I want to start with you. So through my research, I have learned that studies report that human activity is a major contributing factor to the increase of greenhouse gases. And connecting to that, your organization emphasizes the importance of zero waste. What is zero waste, and why should people start thinking of probably going zero waste?
That's a very good question. Zero waste actually is a clever name to encompass basically what we call waste diversion. So diverting waste from going to the landfill, but it also encompasses preventing waste in the first place. So zero is very tough to get to, but it's catchy and that seems to have stuck. But it's important because as an example, we don't want resources such as recyclable material, which can be recycled, to go in the landfill. We also don't want specifically organic material to go to the landfill, and that has its own way of being recycled. Organic material can be recycled into natural gas, or it can be recycled into composting, a soil amendment. And the point being with that is when it ends up in the landfill, organic material in particular, off gases at a very potent rate, much more potent than carbon dioxide. It creates methane and nitrous oxide. So it's important to aim for zero waste, to keep that material, our resources. We live in, the earth is essentially an ecosystem unto itself. And so we deplete our resources, that's all that we've got.
Yes, you sort of touched bases into my next follow-up question about what kind of environmental impacts can we see when it comes to breaking down waste and having it go to landfills?
What can be the impact of diverting that material?
Yes, to landfills, yes.
Yes. So any landfill-bound material, really, what are we doing sending our waste to the landfill? It really very, very little of the material that we currently send to landfill actually cannot be repurposed, recycled in some way. We also handle electronic waste. One of my favorite statistics is that 70% of the toxins that end up in a landfill, leaching out of a landfill, come from electronic waste. Electronic waste only makes up about 2 or 3% of everything that's going into the landfill. And so that gives you a hint at why we want to keep that out of the landfill. The organic material, as I said, off gases, but in addition, there's a social justice issue with regard to food waste. We are in our region throwing away over 500,000 tons a year of food waste. Now, not all of that is edible, but in our region, especially following the pandemic, we have as many as 1 in 3 children who are food insecure. So there's a whole system that's touched by keeping materials out of the landfill. And being mindful of what we consume and what we discard is really an important aspect of that diversion.
Yes, thank you for that great explanation. Staying in the same topic, Carlos, your organization holds a great emphasis on the environments with the Clean and Green program, which helps clean the city of LA. Can you talk about the work behind that program?
Sure. So Clean and Green started in 1986, 88, sorry. Mayor Tom Bradley then reached out to the leadership of the LA Conservation Corps and asked, hey, we want to do something with youngsters. And so it started in middle school with young people from John Adams Middle School, which was across the street from our original site on 29th Street in Maine. The emphasis is to teach and expose young people to what Jessica was talking about and the need to recycle, to reduce our carbon footprint. Well, carbon footprint wasn't a term we used in 88 yet, but that was the idea, is to start young, to get people to have a change in mindset. And so that's what we do at the LA Corps. All of the Corps members who come into the program, whether it's the junior Corps, I like to call the Clean and Green program, which is more middle school, high school age, to the young people that are 18 to 26 years old, is to try to change the mindset, expose them to environmental awareness, environmental stewardship, and what their role can be in it. You know, a lot of us hear about recycle and we do our part by, you know, sorting our recyclables and putting them in the right container. But we talk to our young people about their role as environmental stewards. We have young people that are, you know, performing invasive plant removal, tree planting, recycling, cleaning up alleys, you know, turning brownfield sites into parks. And so getting them to understand that they're not just coming to work with us and spend 7 or 8 hours of work time, but they're making a difference in their own community. I mean, you're talking about most of the population of the LA Conservation Corps are young people of color and come from disadvantaged communities. And so we want them to understand that they can make a difference in their own communities. And, you know, in our case, they're getting paid for it. It's a paid training program, but it's about changing the mindset, exposing them to a different idea and getting them to be environmental stewards, you know, and then taking that back home with them. I'll tell you a quick story. My older brother, Francisco Campero, was a Corps member at the LA Conservation Corps, and he started in 87, 88. I was still a senior in high school. I'm dating myself. And so one day he came home and he started digging a hole in the backyard. And we had cut the lawn and pruned some of the plants. And I said, what are you doing? We can't bury it. He said, oh, we're going to start a compost pile. And I said, what's a compost pile? He said, oh, I learned it at the Corps. And so we started a compost pile, and that was the change in mindset. And that's what caused me to gravitate to joining the LA Conservation Corps. And I've been with the Corps since November 7th, 1988. You know, as a part-time team leader for Clean and Green, I worked for Clean and Green. But what I'm trying to get at is that at the LA Corps, it's not just, hey, come and work for us. It's, hey, come and work for us doing this environmental stewardship projects and change your mindset and really behavior.
Exactly, yes. I was looking more into the work behind it, and it's mainly 18 to 24-year-olds that do that work. So it's great to hear that, you know, they're starting at a young age trying to figure out the awareness of environmental threats that can impact us. Katie, I want to bring you into the subject as well. The Sequoia Parks Conservancy holds the importance of preserving the Sequoia and King Canyon National Parks, which holds some of the world's largest trees. How is climate change affecting the forest with higher temperature and dealing with drought conditions? Is it in any way stressing the trees?
That's a really good question. And yes, in a really short answer, yes, it is affecting the trees. Giant sequoias are amazing trees, the largest trees in the world by volume, but they are not, they're not totally adapted to the conditions that we're seeing today. And so the sequoias are drought stressed. They are also facing issues with bark beetle. As the drought continues and as the drought gets worse, the bark beetle population goes up, and the trees lose their natural defense mechanisms against those beetles. And so, and as you, I'm sure all are aware, we just experienced and are still experiencing a really horrific wildfire that has been devastating Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks over the last month. And we also lost 10 to 14% of the world's monarch sequoias last year in the Castle Fire. And so the last 2 summers, these trees have experienced devastating wildfire. And while some fire is actually good and good for the sequoias, we have prescribed fire and we have wildfire. We are, as the climate warms and as we are experiencing that change, wildfires are burning a lot more, like a lot hotter, and are really, as we've seen, have already devastated and destroyed. 10 to 14% is a big number. We don't know yet what the damage is from this current wildfire, but in short, a lot of the trees, just the sequoias are obviously our big megafauna, but just 5 years ago, we saw a huge die-off of other pine trees in the Sierra Nevada due to bark beetle. And so this is really an issue that we've been facing, not just the last 2 years, but 5 years, and, obviously longer than that too. And it is devastating for the landscape. And, last year our snowpack was almost nothing. We're in a very severe drought. And I think we have a tendency to talk about drought in the winter when the rains are supposed to be here and they're not. And then, but really in the fall, when we're really, really water deprived, that's when we hit our wildfire season. And this year was really, really difficult. And it is hard to see the trees. We are starting to see what we're seeing in the giant sequoias is usually, giant sequoias, they fall, it happens. They're really heavy, huge trees. But what we started to find in the last couple of years is we're finding some monarchs that are dead and standing, which is a really rare thing. We had never seen that before. And some of the park scientists are still learning, we're gathering data as quickly as possible. They're doing an amazing job. But what we're finding is that the bark beetle, which we thought that the sequoias are pretty immune against, is actually getting into the sequoia tree. And that's a really scary thing to think about. And so we've got, it's a little bit of a scary situation right now, but hopefully with the more awareness of climate change and the more that we learn and the more science that happens, we'll be able to support those trees and the natural resources of the parks as we enter into a new climate, really.
Yes, you sort of touched base on the next question that I want to ask you about, referring to the KNP complex fire that started last month. What is the level of containment as of now? Because from what I'm aware of, it's still happening.
Yeah, it's still happening. As of this morning, it is 60% contained. And so, which is a good number. It's a good number. We're getting, we've gotten some snow. This last weekend, we got some snow, and there's still some snow on the ground. We have another weather system coming in this weekend. So crews are working so hard to get that contained. There's still, a fair amount of snow over the large portion of the fire area. So no forward fire progression was made, yesterday, and they're not really expecting anything today. So the weather crew or the fire crews are really have done an incredible job with this fire, and they've worked so incredibly hard to fight for that containment. So we continue to hope to see that number go up and up in the next days and coming weeks.
I now want to introduce a story from one of our reporters here at On Point. Climate change has led to more hot days and longer heat waves. So one organization is trying to add more shade and improve the air quality across Los Angeles. On Point's ALAHNA Martinez has the story.
City Plants is an organization that hosts events to plant trees across Los Angeles, especially in neighborhoods without a lot of tree cover. Gina Ranieri works for the city's sanitation department, which helps with the tree plantings. She says City Plants targets areas near schools and parks.
You're physically healthier when you live in a green neighborhood. A child that lives in an area with trees is 3 times less likely to visit the ER for asthma than a child that does not have any street trees in their neighborhood.
Planting trees also provide shade, which can drastically reduce temperatures.
We really target neighborhoods that don't have a good tree canopy and try to complete that canopy, because trees can reduce the temperature by like 15 to 20 degrees. So if it's 80 degrees out, it can feel 75 degrees in the shade.
By planting trees, City Plants hopes to reduce air pollution caused by environmental hazards and vehicle traffic throughout Los Angeles.
With climate change and all of our emissions, we're just putting a lot of carbon out into our atmosphere. But the only piece of technology that exists in the world to remove that carbon from the air is trees.
For more information on events, or to find out how to get involved, visit online at cityplants.org. Reporting in Sun Valley, I'm ALAHNA Martinez.
Rita, I now want to tie in the following story that we just witnessed, referring to the released data that recently appeared this month of October. So under the LA County Climate Vulnerability Assessment, it's a pretty lengthy study and it's very informative. I believe it was around 141-page PDF file. Several residents in the county live in communities that are considered to be highly exposed to severe climate impacts now and through the year of 2050. What environmental factors are disproportionately affecting these specific communities?
Glad you looked through the whole document. It is lengthy. So, the purpose of the document was to really, like you said, look at kind of like the human impact of climate hazards. And we focused on 5 specific hazards in the assessment, which is what I think you're referring to. One was extreme heat. One is wildfire, as we've talked about today already, intense drought, severe precipitation. On the flip side of drought, we're also going to see more extreme rain events. Possibly even next week, we're going to see northern part of California hit by, what is called an atmospheric river event. And then flooding, both coastal sea level rise, but also inland flooding around our surface water bodies, our rivers and things like that. So those are kind of the main things that we were looking at and how those impacted communities throughout the county.
Yes, and I also want to mention another information from the study. It does stress the fact that low-income communities and people of color within the disproportionate large number who are the highly vulnerable populations. Along with the findings, the study also reveals that Hispanic and Latinx people make up the majority of those residents that are facing these highly vulnerable climate impacts. Why is that so? Why are people of color and people from the Latinx and Hispanic community facing these climate impacts as compared to other communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, unfortunately, across the range of sustainability issues and other issues that our communities are facing, we see a lot of inequities that are deeply tied into racial divides, right? So that's a common theme, and it's no different with climate hazards, unfortunately. It has to do with the history of planning, and it's just kind of the fruits of the history of planning and racial issues that our country and our region have been facing. Climate resilience, the ability to adapt, is very much tied into the resources and the services that a community has. So if people have access to transportation, they're able to get away. We've talked about trees. If the communities have a lot of greenery, a lot of park space, then they're able to adapt better to these climate hazards. So where we see communities that don't have those types of resources, those are the ones that are going to have the hardest time adapting to climate hazards as well.
Yes, and I also want to invite the rest of our panel if they want to have any input with the study and the facts that I just mentioned. But I want to start with Carlos, since your organization is based in LA, and a lot of the members who work at the organization at the LA Conservation Corps, as you mentioned, are Hispanic youth people who are might be facing these impacts that Rita is mentioning. In the study, it reveals that from these specific communities, it's like East LA, Southgate, and San Fernando Valley, which are just a few of the areas from the study that were listed as communities of concern. Do you have any thoughts about that, Carlos, or any of the members from the Conservation Corps that are facing these health impacts and climate impacts as well?
Yeah, so in the story that you mentioned, it talked about city plants. So the LA Corps is a partner with city plants, and we go out and distribute trees and plant trees throughout different communities. So one of the things that we try to do at LA Corps is partner with municipalities to attack or deal with some of these issues where the increased vulnerability for climate change is a big factor. So it, we educate the young people as they come into the program, in their 4-week introduction into the program. It's an immersion into um, climate change, climate health, our role, what we can do. But on top of that, as a program staff, we go out and look for opportunities to partner with municipalities through CAL FIRE grants, community resource, um, urban greening grants, to be able to plant trees or to make a difference. For example, we have a partnership with the city of Artesia where they applied for a CAL FIRE grant in partnership with LA Conservation Corps. And so we're planting 383 street trees or 353 street trees and 30 park trees in the city of Artesia. We planted 200 trees in the city of Bell Gardens through a Prop 84 grant. We are in the process of starting to plant 500 more trees in the city of Bell Gardens through community. It's another community grant with the state of California. And so that's one of the ways that we, try to make a difference, is partnering with municipalities to try to make a difference. In the Boyle Heights, East LA, Pacoima, Lakeview Terrace, in those communities, we also have centers. We have a center in Boyle Heights, we have a center in Lakeview Terrace. And again, we try to make an impact in the communities where we're hiring our young people from. In the unincorporated areas of East Los Angeles, we've been hired by Supervisor Hilda Solis's office to plant trees. We've been hired in Supervisor District 4 to plant trees. So, to answer your question, we try to make a difference physically, but also, spirit and mind with the young people that we serve. I really believe that we serve young people. We don't just employ them. I think that's kind of where they start out, is they're looking for an opportunity to get a job, to get some training. But once they're with us, it becomes about educating them about the difference that they can make in their own communities.
Yes, thank you so much. Does anyone from the rest of the panel have any thoughts about the issue of neighborhood climate?
I'd like to echo a couple things that Carlos said. One is his program is really empowering the youth, and we see how important that is, and especially in underserved communities. When we teach environmental education in schools throughout the San Diego County, and when we go in particular to a school that hasn't had this type of programming before, where we're teaching them to sort their lunch and telling them about the this recycling, or teaching them about composting and how worms can eat the actual organic material and turn it into nutrient-rich soil. It's so empowering for them. And I think the concepts that Carlos was talking about are, right on and consistent with what we see. The other thing I would mention is that it is not only trees, but any plant growth that encourage and sequester carbon. So we teach about composting, and if you land apply compost, it can have carbon sequestration benefits that last as long as 20 years. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So why are we throwing this material in the landfill, where basically it's similar to, if you mine aluminum to make a soda pop can, and then you throw that aluminum can in the landfill, its value is gone. If you recycle it, you can continue to reuse it. And that's the same thing with the nutrients from our soil. When we harvest produce, we're pulling nutrients and minerals from the soil that then deplete the soil. So we want to put those back on there. If we continue with the same agricultural practices we have in place right now, we only have 60 years of agricultural land left in the world. And so we need to be making change, because that really has a long-term impact on our climate, our ability to feed our community, our populations.
Yes, there is a great importance of focusing on developing environmental awareness among the youth, because that's really where it all starts. Rita, I have my last question for you. So what is the next step, the next action really, after the data that was released by the LA County's Chief Sustainability Office with all the information that it contains?
You know, one of our goals with the assessment was really to make it as useful as possible. It is an assessment. It doesn't really include strategies or actions to address the issues. But the reason why we did it was kind of one of the first things our office was focusing on, is because we're really hoping that the information from that assessment gets built into future county plans. And that it's also useful to partners. You know, we talked a lot about community resilience, and we're hoping that the data can be useful to communities as they advocate for solutions themselves and start to plan out what needs to be done in their neighborhood. So there's also a mapping tool that's associated with the assessment that kind of drills down on a geographic scale on the specific risks that are faced by communities. And we're really hoping to make the plan a tool that can be used in, you know, any number of applications and partners.
Yes, thank you so much, Rita. And that is all the time that we have today. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come and talk to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching On Point. We'll be right back.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on LA 36 and Santa Clarita Valley Television. For all of us here at On Point, I'm ALAHNA Martinez.